Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I'm talking about today is one of my own. It is episode 42 of my series Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000 word short story based on a piece of artwork. And today I decided to revisit the apocalypse. I know that doesn't sound like a very pleasant thing to do, but I find myself very drawn to stories in that genre or that setting. There's just something about the bleakness that I really enjoy. So on that note, before you see it, I decided to listen to a soundtrack I have not listened to in a very long time from a film and a novel that I love very, very much, and that is The Road. This soundtrack is by Warren Ellis and Nick Cave, and it's a great one. I really love their subdued instrumentation, and you should check out their other soundtrack too. The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, another great soundtrack, another great film, so check it out if you haven't. So now that I've talked so much about the music, let's check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Wildfire, and it is by an artist named Adam B., who's an illustrator and graphic designer from Warsaw, Poland. I completely forgot about this one, and I've mentioned I bookmark these from time to time because as I'm scrolling through the feed, I see so many pieces of artwork I'd love to write stories to, but I'm only doing one of these a week, so they tend to back up. If you've watched any of these videos, you know I'm a big fan of loose brushwork, and that is exactly what we have here. We have a silhouetted figure standing amid a ruined city, and there is a wildfire off in the distance. And the immediate idea that came to me when I saw this was somebody with a destination in mind. They were headed somewhere, possibly with hope, and this is where they ended up once they discovered the destination they were seeking. Even though you can't see this man's face, there's just something about his stance, his slack arms, lack of any kind of physical activity other than just standing there that speaks volumes to me. Being such a massive fan of post-apocalyptic stories, I couldn't pass this one up. So thank you, Adam. I wish you still had Instagram so I could tag you in this to show you how much I appreciate it. Hopefully, sometime down the line, you'll discover it. All right, let's see what I came up with. The scent of a campfire drifted through the broken window of the broken building Abe had spent the last 2 nights in, breaking his own rules. But he was tired and hadn't seen his soul in weeks. A man needed luxuries in a world that had none. Funny thing, calling himself a man. But Billy wasn't here to tell him otherwise. He would be soon, though. Or rather, Abe would be there. Why did grown men choose to keep their boy names into adulthood? He'd never asked Billy, never dared ask, because Billy had always said boys didn't have the right to ask questions, just to listen, to learn, and when they became men, all the questions they'd been saving up for all those years, they'd know the answers to, from listening. Abe listened, to the sigh of the building, of the wind, of himself. It was too loud. At least the snowflake the wind carried was silent, tumbling and twirling on air that Samantha might have breathed a few days ago. The direction was right. The smell was right. Pine and flowers. Abe didn't know much about flowers, just that she was as pretty as they smelled. Soon he'd smell her again, pretending to dodge the smoke of the campfire that he smelled stronger and stronger. His memory of the clearing outside the cabin, split by the creek with the unnecessary bridge they'd built together, the 3 of them. So narrow that stream was, barely a trickle, but that bridge had added a sense of home, a symbol of welcome for anyone passing by, saying, "This is a home where we care so much if a stranger's boots get wet that we built a silly little bridge across a dribble of a creek." Abe went to the window. The light was nice, so he took out his journal of questions he didn't have the answers to. A dried flower pressed right in the center of it, he didn't dare use as a bookmark, even though it kind of was one. Blue and yellow with white flecks at the ends of the petals, as if it were wise. Maybe it was. Maybe it had the answers to the questions he had. It would tell them to Samantha when he saw her, and maybe she'd tell him if Billy still gave him shit about having so many questions. All this thinking, all this remembering, all this dreaming filled his mind with answers. Ones he was about to see come true when he got through the city to that open space where there should have been roads but weren't. A rare thing the people were who constructed it, leaving that picturesque slice of untouched nature untouched. Abe closed the journal and drummed his fingers on it, then gave it a good luck pat after stashing it in his front pocket, where he always kept it, on the left side of his chest. Billy would call him a sentimental bastard. Samantha probably would too. He smiled, hearing them enact his scene that had never been. Abe looked forward to the ones that would soon be. His pack packed and his rifle shouldered, Abe left the building he'd called home for too long. He waved to it, sad to go, and it seemed sad to see him go. He turned to look at it again after he'd walked for some time, and it looked like all the rest. He stuck to the middle of the road, which seemed like a bad idea, considering he stuck out like whatever stuck out most in a gray city, growing a coat of white snow. Billy would say a thumb, because he didn't have much imagination, and Samantha would say a fox, not a white one, but a red one, her favorite animal. Abe liked to imagine there was hidden meaning there about him being handsome, even though usually women were referred to as foxes, at some point in history anyway. He thought about jotting that question down in his journal, but he had enough for Billy to make fun of him. He caught his reflection in an intact window. The very fact he'd found a window to see his reflection at the moment he thought about his appearance in a city of shattered windows gave him hope. Not that he needed it. The smell of smoke was stronger, the smell of pine. The sky was clear. He couldn't wait to round the corner up ahead and see what he'd smelled since waking, streaming straight up from the trees until it dissipated into a scribble. He continued at a leisurely pace because he wanted to savor that moment. Still, his heart beat faster. Would they remember him? Of course they would. It had only been a few months, hadn't it? He hadn't kept track. Something he hated himself for. But by the time the days turned into weeks, weeks turned into meaningless cycles of hiding and scavenging for food, but always thinking of them and that silly little bridge across the stream to a cabin big enough for the three of them, plus anyone who needed a roof for a night to give them the courage to go on. It was hard to go on, Abe knew. He was done with it. Abe stepped around a barricade of shopping carts, logoed with the market he knew so well, through the parking lot of what had been his favorite burger joint, down a sidewalk Billy taught him to ride a bike on, because he told him learning on grass wasn't for any blood of his, and that girls liked scars way more than tattoos. He'd see what Samantha had to say about that. When Abe rounded the corner where the city opened up, he knew he'd never have the answer to that question, nor the one filling his journal. All he could do was watch as smoke flooded the sky, belched by flames that weren't from a campfire at all. Here I find myself with another piece of artwork of someone staring into the distance. I know I make fun of those a lot, but this one really just captured my attention. It's the composition, the color palette, the loose brushstrokes, all of those things. And of course, I'm a fan of post-apocalyptic stuff, so there we are. And because I knew it had to end with a fire, as I mentioned when I talk about the artwork, I decided that I decided that this was someone heading to a destination, searching for something hopeful. And so I imagined him traveling through this city just to come to the terrible realization that where he was going was impossibly impassable, destroyed essentially. And so that's why I started the story with the scent of a campfire drifted through the broken window of the broken building. And I like to play with those kinds of things. There's a lot of repetition, even breaking his own rules. Fun little word things I like to do from time to time. I feel like, you want to be as communicative as you can, as clear as you can in your writing, but I still feel like there's room to play a little bit. There's some music in there. I like to try to find, sometimes it's alliteration, sometimes it's repetition for emphasis. There's so many tools at your disposal. So if you are discouraged or if you have been encouraged to avoid things like that, I don't think it's bad. You know, it's one of those things where it's just too much can be bad. However, I think here and there it's fun and it really enhances the story. And so you can see immediately I start going into world building. Well, I should say more like the building this person's backstory. And I I don't know where it came from. Just a man needs luxuries in a world that had none. Funny thing, calling himself a man. And something about this the silhouette of this character, it had a boyish nature. It's the narrow face and narrow head, longer neck, narrower shoulders. Not that a man can't be built this way, but I imagined that this character wasn't the quote unquote alpha male. Let's just say that. And so I thought maybe I would put him in a not so much a younger role mentally, but just, chronologically. Maybe he has an older brother who this guy, Billy. I didn't know he was his brother at this time. I just chose a figure named Billy. And again, playing with the idea of a man named Billy. I personally always do think it is funny when adults have names like Billy and Bobby. It's just weird to me. So, again, bringing some of my own stuff into the story, as I think we all do. And I decided he had a journal of questions. I don't know where this came from either. I don't know where any of it comes. You just start writing and things just kind of start happening. I knew what I wanted to do is have this guy, he's traveling to this destination he's been before. He's meeting up with some people. He's been gone a long time, presumably. I didn't really know at this point, but he can't wait to get back, and he's reminiscing about these two. He's thinking about them. He's thinking about Billy, even though he is, a dominating and kind of possibly aggressive figure. He misses him, and then of course Samantha, who he's has a crush on, is in love with, I dare say. And then I move on. I imagine them living in this cabin in the woods, starting to talk about that. I really wanted to bring the fire, and maybe it was too obvious. I'm not sure. I think looking at the photo, looking at this picture, you know what's going to happen, right? When I start talking about a campfire in the beginning, how he's smelling it through this window, you know what's going on. It's not a campfire, but I think someone reading this story just without seeing the image, maybe it does lend itself to an impactful ending when he does have the realization at the end when he sees the forest burning. But I thought it was fun just to create this kind of end of the world scenario where these three people are living together in this cabin, this cozy cabin in the woods, with this stupid little bridge across this narrow stream. It's something that adds character. I think people do things that are, illogical, kind of pointless, but it makes us human, things like that. And so I added, this is a home where we care so much if a stranger's boots get wet that we built a silly little bridge across the dribble of a creek. So it's just people trying to find humanity, I think, in a world that is lacking. And the funny thing is, I didn't really have him move too much, right? He starts in this building that's broken, goes to the window, goes down the street, crosses some, familiar landmarks, and then that's it. Then we find him as we see here in this image. And really that changed. I wanted to have him move a lot. I didn't want it to be so introspective, but whatever the story takes you where it takes you. And I didn't want to fight it. That's the last thing I want to do is set out with an idea of a concept of like an execution is a better way of saying it. And then fight what comes out naturally. And I think honestly, that's what I'm struggling with my novel right now is I want it to be a certain way for some reason, and I'm afraid to go down certain paths. So I think I just need to write it, just like stream of consciousness, get this crappy draft out, take a step back, look at it. So don't fight what comes out naturally. If these words are just flowing out, leave them. Maybe that's what the story needs to be. And if not, you can always analyze it later, because rarely are the first drafts the best ones. Probably never, unless you're a virtuoso or something, a gifted soul. But then I started, I had this idea where this guy named Abe, he kept this journal, all these questions, because I started off where he didn't dare ask Billy about why he had the name of a boy, or he kept his boyhood name. And that was because Billy said, children aren't allowed to ask questions. They listen and they learn, and they by the time, if they listen and learn well enough, they won't have any questions at the end. However, Abe has this journal full of them, and also he has a a dried flower, a pressed flower in the book, that either he saved for Samantha, or wanted to give to her, or reminded him of her. And so these are just symbolic things, I think, as people. And I think it's important in storytelling as well to be as realistic in that regard as you can. And people do always take tokens of things. People are sentimental inherently, I think. Even the most self-described unsentimental people, they can be. And so they like these items, these artifacts. And so that's what I went with. And I think I try to do that in books, because everyone's that way. Everyone likes to keep little things, either notes, gifts, shirts, clothing, something that reminds them, a lock of hair, maybe, if you're if you're really bad. But anyway, I'll move on. So yeah, we talk about, Abe is thinking more about, he looks at himself, he sees a window, and that's an anomaly. I think that's another symbol that gives him hope, right? Because this building, or all these buildings you can see, are just, their windows are completely shattered, and I just assumed the rest of them were that way. And so when he found this window that was intact, it was a sign. People are always looking for signs, and to him that was a positive sign that he was going to get where he's going, and they would be there. And I brought out the smell of smoke again, to indicate that he is getting closer to his destination. The smell of pine, the forest that he knows so well and misses so much. And already I'm at 800 words, so this was relatively quick. I think it wasn't too tough. I felt like the bulk of it came out relatively easily. I just needed to figure out how I wanted to end it, right? Like, what was the impactful ending? I don't know. I think the ending was all right. It wasn't the best. I think it could have had more impact. I think if I would have added some elements here and there throughout the story that would call back. And yes, I know I started with a campfire and I ended with a campfire. But I don't know. There's some things I could have added, I feel like. And it's funny, when I read the story for the video, I noticed that there was the bit about him hanging out with Samantha, dodging the smoke just to kind of get close to her. And I forgot to flesh that out. It popped into my head, but then I just kept going on with the sentence. I didn't want to stop, and I knew I would come back to it, but I never came back to it. So I think that's kind of, I know a lot of people say when you're writing a draft, you should just go, go, go. Don't ever stop. Don't edit. But sometimes, if you don't stop to jot anything down, and that's why a lot of times I do it like within the draft. I don't add a separate note, right? I type usually what I do is type "fix me," all caps, in parentheses, add what I want to do here. So I can just keep going. I don't need to step away into another app or add a note card or something within, like, Wavemaker, for instance. However, I didn't do that here. And I don't think I've ever done that, honestly, in any of these short stories. And now that I'm thinking out loud, it's probably something I should be doing. So hopefully I don't miss things like that. But these are usually pretty quick exercises. And so I don't ever imagine that I'm going to spend a lot of time reflecting on what I've written. It's pretty much, it is all captured within the time you see here. And I guess the fix me notes are a little bit more for long-term stuff, or short, long form stuff. And you can tell a lot by what Abe's saying about the kind of guy he is, right? In all these post-apocalyptic movies, everybody is afraid for their lives. Everybody is guarded of their possessions, and everyone's essentially gone primal on everybody else. And so I wanted to add that little element too. I didn't want him to be too pessimistic. I wanted to be a pretty positive guy, because I think positivity is a great trait to have in stories like these, because it's the inverse of what is. And I wanted him to be very familiar with this city. I like the idea. There's something about this view, right? It's an interesting view, because we see these buildings off to the side, but then there's this wide open forest, and it doesn't seem to be any detail there in the background before the forest edge. And so I wanted to capture that, and I mentioned that he kind of commended the engineers who designed the layout, and that they left that untouched nature untouched. And so I was trying to build up where he was finally getting to that point. He was seeing these very familiar landmarks, his favorite burger joint, the supermarket, even where Billy had taught him to ride a bike, to be the last thing, right? Because it's always building up. I started with the unfamiliar, and I moved to the familiar, because not only is that an indication of him getting closer to his destination, it's an indication of his mental state. And without being literal, saying, "Oh, Abe was getting excited because he was getting closer." I weave those things in there, hopefully that the reader, would read between the lines to glean that. And that line there from listening, Abe listened. I like to do things like that a lot. I think I don't know. I look at it as almost like a match cut in a film. I saw Quiet Place 2 today, and there were some really nice match cuts in there, and I think those are really powerful images that, sometimes may feel a little bit on the nose, but I feel like a lot of time they just really help show the parallels in storytelling, things you can do to emphasize other things, and it's just like that, that subsurface content that really is what makes storytelling powerful. I think it's not the surface stuff, it's not the dialogue, it's like what is unsaid. If you take the lines literally, you're missing out on so much. And so that is what I try to do in writing. It's not an exact match cut, but it is kind of close. But yeah, here I am at 1020 words. I went over. I think I went to as high as 1050, which I don't really like to do because 50 words can be harder to cut than it may seem in a 1,000-word story. But here I am, I'm just deleting full sentences. And I think that, if anything, going way over is a great exercise in understanding what you really need, right? As Stephen King says, or kill your darlings, murder your darlings. Not that any of those sentences were darlings, but and here I am, right at 1,000, an hour and 10 in, and I am wrapping it up. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I'm so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like about the story that you just heard or read. So I suppose we should start with the good stuff. I think I captured what I set out to capture. I wanted to tell a post-apocalyptic tale, nothing with high action, because this image is really contemplative. There's a character looking off into the distance. He has very defeated body language, at least in my opinion, even though we can't see his face, so we don't know his true feelings or anything like that. But really what I wanted to do is I wanted this artwork to be the very end. I just pictured this character from the second I saw this piece of artwork. I pictured him walking down the street where this city opens up, seeing this forest completely ablaze, because he had been headed there for some reason, which I discovered in the story, but I didn't know when I set out. And so I was trying to build up this hope. I wanted him to be a positive character. I wanted him to be reminiscing about better times. I wanted to have a contrast to this gray environment. And I was pretty happy with the world building, or his world building, his backstory as I figured it out. I created these other additional characters, and it felt good to me. It felt like someone thinking about people he knew very well, and all their quirks and rough edges. So I was okay with all of that. So what didn't I like? Well, I think I could have made the ending more impactful. I think I did, pepper in the beginning and somewhere toward the middle about the campfire, and that was sort of the triggering thing that he sensed that really started this cascade of thoughts in his head, that was a vessel for us to learn about these people who were very close to him. And while I don't think the ending is a complete failing or anything like that, I just probably could have been stronger. I think really when I get it, when everything sinks in for me, is when I read the story back. It's not when I'm reading it in my head as I'm doing the edit and the screen capture. It's really when I go through it and read it, really just hear the words, that I notice these things. And so that's why, it's really important to read your work aloud, or what I even prefer more than that is to have the computer read it for you. Because a lot of times when you're reading something, even if you read it aloud, sometimes your brain still just fills in those gaps, those errors, and you can miss things, whereas the computer is going to miss nothing at all. And I tend to do that toward the polish phase of anything I do. So if you're not doing that already, highly recommend it. I guarantee you're going to discover some things you didn't think were there. Well, that's it for me. I will keep it short. I hope you enjoyed the story. I had a good time, as I always do. This was not, thankfully, a frustrating one. I have had plenty of frustrating ones in the series. If you're not new here, you know all too well. Yet still, I go on. So persevere. That is the nugget of wisdom today I give you. So if you'd like to support the channel and you like this video, give me a like. Consider subscribing if you like story-related content. Share this video with a friend, a writer friend, a reader friend, someone who enjoys storytelling. You can check out my books in the description below if you want to see my other long form work. And keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else. Promise. Thanks again.